Hey, I'm Rachel Hession, the creator and host of the Springboard Music Podcast. And this season, you'll be hearing from
President, Jesus Culture Music,
the Executive Director,
a production manager,
the SVP of Marketing and Digital,
lead YouTube operations,
the CEO at Adarga Entertainment Group.
And you're listening to the Springboard
Music Podcast.
It's about who knows you're out there and you're crushing it. So that when an opportunity comes up, you're the first person that people think about. When you're graduating school, then it's you and however many people with that piece of paper, that resume. Then you say, okay, then that's even wider. Okay, who from your school is going for the same job? Who from what other school is going for that same job? Who in the United States? If you're relying on just this piece of paper to get you ahead, like, it's not going to work. It'll help in some ways, but it's got to be you. How do you set yourself apart? And by doing great work, by being intentional to network, to impact people, everything's possible.
Brad Wilson and I work together at Capital Christian Music Group, so we go quite a ways back. He holds a lot of merit at Belmont University as an adjunct professor for a couple of classes, as well as in the professional space. His story talks about how he gained connections in the music industry during college, including interviewing Joan Jett. I cannot wait for you to hear as Brad shares his stories, his insights, and maybe it'll even inspire you to take his classes at Belmont. I want to start with asking you, the very first thing on your resume is that you worked at an artist management company. How is that the first thing on a resume?
Well, I'll tell you why it's the first thing, because it was my own artist management company. I was the CEO and founder of Vacant Artist Management. And so the way that happened was I was in Atlanta. I'm from Georgia originally. And I've got a whole story of how I discovered music and how I discovered pursuing music as a career. But right at those beginning stages, I saw this artist perform an acoustic show in downtown Atlanta, and he sounded like a mix between Weezer and Switchfoot.
Oh, cool.
And I just knew I had to be involved in it. And so afterwards, I asked him if I could manage him. And shockingly, he said yes. And then I went home and Googled, what is an artist manager?
You were just like, I like that artist. What did you think that was going to entail?
I had no idea. But then
How old were you?
I was like 20 years old. And I had then read this book immediately after he said yes. I read this book that I still use today for my students at Belmont. This book called All You Need to Know About the Music Business.
I'm familiar.
So I'm 40. So 20 years ago, this was like -10 edition. So this is in the dark ages, but it was still incredible resource. I'd never seen a contract before. So the question is, why did I do this? It's because I didn't have a choice. There was something inside of me that was desperate to get out. You glorify that which you love. And, and I think that's what it was, is I saw this thing in this artist, Jonathan, and I loved music so deeply, even then as a 20-year-old. And I just said, what can I do? Then I started to just try to figure it out after that by reading books. And next thing you know, I was negotiating contracts for release in Japan. I'm doing like radio events, and then of course, like many things in life. And I just saw this artist last weekend. I was at a music festival in Alabama called Furnace Fest, and I ran into him, Jonathan, there. And I was reflecting back on that, and it's just the idea that our time together, we made this record that I'm still so proud of as an artist manager. It'll always go down as probably my biggest achievement because it means the most. I mean, literally every single thing I did after management made me more money, because I made $0 as an artist manager. But I don't know what meant more. And so this aspiration for he and I to take over the world together, like most things in life, things hardly turn out at all the way that you hope. But somehow they turn out better than you could have imagined. That's really kind of my mission statement is here I am 20 years into the industry, and so many of the things that I've gone after if I had a vision of what success looked like, or what I wanted to see happen, that thing didn't happen, but ultimately something so far greater did. Um, and so management was the first step for me in the music industry.
You said that you met this artist, you went home. Well, first of all, you met this artist, you said, "Hey, can I manage you?" He said, "Sure, buddy. That sounds good." You went home, read all about the music business, and then you skip to now I'm doing radio stuff and doing this contract for Japan. Like, where did you start? Like, had you been studying music business? Was the book just like all that you had? How were you like, okay, let me prove to you that I can be a manager? What were those steps?
It was all at once. I had no experience, but for a young artist, so if you're in the music business and you have an aspiration to manage somebody, you can like this artist was not a he was a baby band too, and so beggars can't be choosers in any level in life, right? So this artist, he was incredibly talented, but so my passion can overcome a well of errors, and
I love that. That's true.
right. And so that's what you do. As an artist, you look for people, you look for the super fans, you look for people that believe. The way I judge music and character is the same. I ask the question, do I believe you? And then I was just figuring it out. I was then asking people, I was researching contracts, and then like, how do you do this? What do these terms mean? And that book really was my professional Bible for a season, and now it's the book that I teach out of. There's a big thing that I discovered early on, is this is another core idea of my career, is that the difference between people that do awesome things in this life and those who don't, the only difference is those who do, they just do it. Like the Nike slogan, they just do it. Like, I
Totally.
decided that I was going to manage this band, so I just started doing it.
Yep.
Whether I did it well, I don't know.
I have no idea how to do a podcast. I just knew it
Right,
needed to exist. So I was like,
right.
well, I guess I literally went onto my phone and Googled like how to start a podcast. Like, is there a podcast that can teach me how to start a podcast?
Exactly.
And like you just every day do one thing that will put you towards what you want to do.
Amazing.
Just
Yes.
one thing. It could be small. It could be creating the handle for your socials. It could be whatever. For you, it could be, okay, let's identify some core fans or some two places when you were, in management. Like, let's identify two places to start setting up a live show or whatever.
And just as long as you're moving in some direction, you'll just keep learning. Like that's how people do it. They just figure it out. And for anybody who's had monster success in this life, you just have never seen the millions of failures that they had. I have failed so much in my career, and it's through like the humility that comes from that I continue to keep growing and keep leveling up.
Why did you decide to dissolve the management company?
Well, because the band that I was managing was called The Good Fight out of Atlanta. And it was a situation where it was devastating because it was made up of one singer-songwriter. The guy asked that I could manage him. And he had some guys that played with him, but then they quickly left the band and wanted to do their own thing. They thought his music was way too poppy. And so Jonathan, the artist, he could never find guys to play with him. He had these incredible songs that I still deeply believe in. He's an amazing man too. It wasn't like he wasn't likable, but he just couldn't find like there's so much that goes into a band happening. and and eventually he just couldn't do anymore. He couldn't he We could never get the momentum to get things off the ground beyond those sparks. And then he eventually decided to leave music. Now he's a wildly successful real estate agent in Mongol with
Wow.
7 kids, and I'm still in the music industry.
You got lassoed up, he got free. That's how it all went.
Yeah, but there's it wouldn't be any other way. Music is something you only do if you have no choice. If
Yep.
it's what keeps you up at night, and for me, like I keep using these phrase mission statements, and so for me, the when I knew that I was going to pursue music as a career, is I read this quote that says, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that, because what the world needs are people that have come alive." And to me, when I read that, that told me like this is it. Like the way that I could make the biggest impact on people is by being the fullest version of myself. And what were those things that were in my DNA? What are the things that I had to do because I didn't have a choice? Um, and it was music. And I remember feeling alienated. I was that dude with pink hair in high school and purple hair. I wish you could like flash to like a picture
Dude,
of me.
give me a photo and I will flash a
Yeah,
picture
there's a
on the
great
video
shot of me like
recording.
leaning up against a stanchion with pink hair. It's not photoshopped. But I was that guy who I was brutally uncool. I would get food thrown at me at lunch, and when I
Oh,
was
that's
alone in
horrible.
my room with these punk rock records, like I found my voice, and I wasn't alone. And then when I discovered that I could pursue a career in music and then it not be in a performance, that opened the floodgates for everything.
That's how it was for me as well. I was the crazy girl who was always journaling, like writing song lyrics. Like I would write my own lyrics throughout class. I would
No
just be
way.
journaling songs. Oh, yeah. But then you get to a certain age in high school where you realize, those people over there are probably going to make it. I'm probably not going to be cut out for this.
Mm,
And the way I realized you could do music as a career was when I went outside of myself and outside of the show of American Idol and realized, wait, some of those judges they're not performers. Like Simon Cowell, he's not a performer. How did he
right.
get here?
Yeah.
Just doing research that way and being curious about the industry that surrounds the thing you're passionate about.
And for me, it started, I didn't think I was ever going to become anything in life. And I say that it's not like I had this terrible childhood. I was from a very deeply lower middle class family. I was that family who we got like our Christmas presents a lot of years from the local church, and had come from a broken home by both parents that deeply loved us. And I just didn't think I was ever going to become anything. I didn't think I was ever going to go to college, or I just thought I was on a track to fail in life. I don't, and but when I was in 11th grade in my lit class, I saw this movie. They showed this movie called Dead Poet Society, which stars Robin Williams as this inspiring teacher, which is a school that's actually based off of a school in Nashville called Montgomery Bell Academy.
I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah, I've been dying to like tour the tour the campus, but it was based on a teacher who was there for a season, and so this it's got these famous quotes like "Carpe diem," which means seize the day, but it was the first time in my life that it pushed against the idea that maybe I wasn't destined to fail, that maybe I could become something. And then like because Robin through poetry in this group and these students like inspires them to be able to dream and to wonder and to be curious. And so that was the first time that I was like, gosh, like maybe I could do something. And then that sort of opened up that, and then along with my faith, which is an equally massive or the most important part of my life. Those two things together kind of set off you know, set me on a path towards, discovering who I was and what I was made for.
That makes a lot of sense why then when you saw the artist playing, you were like, ah, this is a good intersection and a good opportunity, and I believe in you. Like,
Exactly.
like you said, like, do I believe you? Can I trust you? Like that's something that you use as a guide. And you saw that in him. So then my question is, on paper, it kind of looked like a dead end. Like you were managing for 2 years, the band dissolved. How are you still here?
Yeah, I guess so. At the time, that's when I discovered that I could actually get a degree in the recording industry and it not be a performance-based degree. And so I heard about this school 40 minutes east of Nashville called Middle Tennessee State University. And at the time, I was going to a community college called Floyd College in Georgia. And my mom had filled out my application to college. And I was there, and it was like I was it was pretty lame. I'm grateful for it. Shout out to anybody who still goes to Floyd or it's now called Georgia Highlands College. I'm so grateful for that experience, but I had to go through and I had to like retake a ton of classes because I wasn't on the college track. And so I was in this community college. I was taking all these classes, and then I heard about this school, MTSU. And so at the same time, like me going to the school and management were kind of happening at the same time. I took a really unique career path or college path where I was in community college for a year and a half, 2 years. I went to MTSU for one single semester. It totally changed my life. It blew my mind. And then knowing it changed my life, I then took a year and a half off
Wait,
for
why?
well,
It sounds like you were like getting fueled. It was exciting. It was exactly what you wanted to learn. And then you're like, all right, but bye.
yeah, life just kind of has a way of getting in your way. And that was I had all these big plans for college in that at that school. And I remember I had some relational stuff that came up that caused me to, lean into some commitments that brought me back to Georgia. And then I had an opportunity to be like a booking agent for somebody who books like Shania Twain's guitar player. A booking agent is someone who books like live performances. It was just a few conversations. It never amounted to anything, no jobs, no anything. But for whatever reason, so I ended up back home for a year and a half working at an office job. I had a temp job. And it was kind of this thing where I had come alive through college, then came back home to do like personal responsibilities type things.
Totally. Yeah.
And my heart had never left MTSU. And so finally, a year and a half later, I was able to move back to Tennessee and finish out my degree. And then from there, it was on. Like I went all in on every aspect. And and that's when I discovered college radio, and that changed my life and led to a springboard, you know, pun intended.
Thank you. I'm
Um,
so glad you inserted that. That should be part of like the commitment to being on the
yeah,
podcast.
you have to use the
The
phrase
guest
springboard.
has to use the word springboard.
But that's really what it was. For me, it's you can see these building blocks. It was management, then it was college radio, then it was my, BMI after college, Capital or Universal Music Group, now then Belmont University, then where I'm at now at the Orchard and Sony Music and AWOL. But everything kind of built off of each other. Definitely.
I saw on your resume that you were a college marketing rep. I have seen positions for this still to this day
Oh yeah.
for like that. Yeah, the other labels will post or whatever of like college rep in like Pennsylvania. I think UMG had like one in Pennsylvania
Yep.
opened or something. And
Yeah.
it's like, what is that? How I feel like that's might maybe be a little Easter egg that people don't know about. Maybe.
Oh, dude, it's awesome. And it shaped me so much. So in college, when I came back, because you should know this. I didn't graduate college until I was 26 years old. So
Wow.
I work with a lot of students that feel like they need to have everything figured out. I'm like, dude, like I'll be like, how old are you? I was like, and they're like 18. I was like, look, even if you wasted the next like 4 years, you would still be way ahead of me, way ahead of where I was. But so when I was in school, when I was the music director at this college radio station, this in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, we had this like grungy, awesome office where all these directors were hanging out. And this girl comes up, and she looks like she's a sorority girl. I think she was named Charity, and she goes, "Hi, I'm from Sony Music. Would you guys like any free music?" And everybody kind of like turned their nose up to her. They were being super pretentious. I don't know why. And I was like, dude, no, like, please, like, come on in. Like, let me give you a tour of the studio. I'd love to like talk with you. And then she gave me like a bunch of CDs. I was so stoked. And so for each month after that, I was so excited about getting free music from such a huge record label that we would meet up. I would drive like 40 minutes to an Olive Garden off of Bell Road,
Oh
and
no.
we would of course unlimited soup salad breadsticks, unbelievable, a gift
College
from the heart.
student's dream.
Right. So I we we would meet up, and then after we caught up, she would take me to her car and just open up her trunk, and it was a treasure trove of like posters and CDs and records. Uh, and so I would just take everything that she would have, and I would use them for the radio station, or I would keep them for myself. And so when she graduated or was graduating, I like begged her. I said, Charity, like, please, you have to recommend me for this Sony job. And she did. And I haven't talked to her in quite a few years. I need to reach out to her and just let her know like how much of a big part of her story, my story, she was, and how she impacted me. Because she didn't have to give me that recommendation. So I got on the phone with the head of the college marketing department, Frank DeSico, who is a huge mentor of mine to this day. And he says he would call me Nashville. He didn't call me by my name. He said, Nashville. He said, we need someone that has 2 years left in their college time. You only have a year and a half. Also, you don't actually live in Nashville. You
Oh
live like
man.
40 minutes away. And I said, Frank, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to Nashville every day. I'll work twice as hard as somebody who's got 4 years left. Just if you give me this opportunity, I won't let you down. And he saw something in me. And so he said yes, and I would regularly drive downtown. I was had major accounts like Grimey's. Shout out to one of the best record stores in the country,
Yeah.
and I would work events and send in recaps, concerts. I would do like screenings of music films, back to school events. I did all this incredible. Like I had an actual job at the largest music company in the world while I was in school, and Frank taught me this idea. He taught me to get to this level of work ethic that I didn't know I was capable of, and he had this phrase that I'll never forget. A lot of people say coming up in the industry that it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And I hate that phrase because it means like if you don't have the right connections, you're not going to succeed. It's garbage. It removes all work ethic, determination, um, and drive. And so Frank would say, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. It's about who knows you're out there and you're crushing it. And because so that when an opportunity comes up, you're making such an impact that when an opportunity comes up, you're the first person that people think about. So that when you're graduating school, right, if you're just basing it off of that, then it's you and however many people with that piece of paper, that resume. Then you say, okay, then that's even wider. Okay, who from your school is going for the same job? Who from what other school is going for that same job? Who in the United States? So if you're relying on just this piece of paper to get you ahead, like it's not going to work. It'll help in some ways, but it's got to be you. How do you set yourself apart? And by doing great work, by being intentional to network, to impact people, I mean, this is what it is right now. Rachel, you and I have been friends for years because we've worked together in the industry.
And you were just like the friendliest guy. You would come up from the second floor and you'd be
Right.
like, just getting my coffee, just want to get to know everybody. And I'm like,
Right.
wow, this is a breath of fresh air.
Right. And that's exactly what I thought about you. So then you're like, hey, do you want to do this? It's like, yes, of course. I'm like done. Yes, 2 years ago, ready to do this.
And we'll get to it, but like little did we know that we would end up indirectly working together again.
Right.
Yeah.
So it like everything's possible. And but that was the big thing, is like it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. So that kind of led to everything. If I hadn't, everybody in that college radio office had the same opportunity as I did to welcome that person in, and they chose not to. Every person, had the ability to ask her to recommend them for a job, or other people did. They didn't, and so everything I've kind of done. I mean, my first radio interview ever was on Joan Jett's tour bus. Joan Jett is the
Oh my
godmother of
gosh.
rock and roll. She's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh
And
no, I
people,
know who Joan Jett is. That's insane.
she's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
her song is used in the theme to my favorite show of all time, Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
Bad Reputation.
That's my favorite Joan Jett song. I remember jamming, sorry, mom and dad, but I remember jamming out to that with my like iPod shuffle in 6th grade, 7th grade, and my like angsty stage. I love Joan Jett. So wait, how did that happen?
Because I was a college radio music director. I saw
That's
that
from college radio?
from college radio, because this is it. This is why I say just do it. I get an email that her album is being worked to college radio. So I take this huge shot in the dark, this Hail Mary, and I reach out to the label and I said, "Hey, look, is there any chance that she would be willing to do an interview with me?" And to my disbelief, they said yes. And next thing I know, I'm on her tour bus at the Warp Tour doing an interview that goes twice as long as it's supposed to, because she's enjoying it. She had prepared for it to suck. And it was like this college kid, like whatever. And it went twice as long as it should have. And then next thing you know, I'm on the side of the stage as she's performing, getting to like watch her perform. And again, anybody else had that opportunity. And so when I was in college, Rachel, I interviewed my favorite album of all time, and I consider to be the greatest album of all time, is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I got to interview Brian Wilson, the greatest American composer in history, when I was in college, because I was interning at Tooth and Nail Records at the building that you and I were in. I was there in college, and I got, this is going to date me, I got an AOL instant message.
Oh, yeah.
This guy.
AIM.
And this guy says, "You're not going to believe this." He knew I was a big Beach Boys fan. And he says, "You're not going to believe this. Brian Wilson, he's got a new album. He's willing to do some college radio interviews. Do you want one?" And I'm like, yes, thinking I'd have weeks to prepare. Because I knew a lot of things about Brian. I knew that he was old. I knew that he was a musical genius.
Start
so when
there.
you're a genius in one area, you kind of lose something in another area. I knew he did a ton of drugs. And I knew he got messed up by a psychiatrist. So I knew it wasn't going to be an easy interview. So I thought I would have a few weeks or at least a few days to prepare. And I would say, okay, yes, like when's the interview? And they're like, he's like, today at 2:15. And this is like at like 12 o'clock. And so I was like, I'm at my internship. I can't leave. And I was kind of looking at that as like an excuse. Then I go to my boss, Chad Johnson, who was the director of A&R at Tooth and Nail Records at the time. I said, "Chad, here's this opportunity." He's like, "Dude, you got to do this." And I'm like, he said, go now, go. And I did. And it ended up being the most uncomfortable, beautiful 15 minutes of my life. And I never would have had it if I didn't wear my affections on my sleeve. Like I knew I was a Beach Boys fan. Like if I didn't use my passion, the guy didn't have to ask, that I love the Beach Boys. He knew it. And so that's it. I also interviewed Pharrell Williams. There was a huge band at the time when I was in college named Mute Math. It's one of the best live shows you'll ever see. I had them in studio playing. and I did like performance after performance just because I was, willing to believe that if I asked, that there was a chance someone could say yes.
Well, people, I mean, now sitting in this chair over here who sets up the radio interviews and the radio tours, I I want people to bring me those opportunities because
Yeah,
what if it's a little slower for that artist? Like I want them to be able and any outlet of marketing is beneficial. It helps us both. So I
totally.
want to say yes if I can say yes. So now, it's something that when you're in the college chair, you're like, there's no way they're going to say yes. And now being in this chair, it's like, there's very few ways I'm going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah, give people something to say yes to.
Hmm.
That was something, this dude, Jeff Gunkel, he said, I think to me in passing one day, like, he was my boss, and he said, give me something to say yes to. And I thought, oh, like, that's pretty profound. Like, be prepared to, like, have something, bring something to the table, like, know what it is that you want.
That's so good. So I'm curious because you're an adjunct professor. Are you adjunct or straight on professor at Belmont?
No, I'm an adjunct. I've been an adjunct for this is my 7th year teaching. I teach a overview of the music industry called Survey of Music Business, and I also teach a career foundations course. I teach, resume building, character building. I kind of joke, I teach students how not to be douchebags in the workplace. I don't know if that's okay to say douchebag, and but it's developing integrity and laying the foundation for their, for who they are in their career. So I've been doing that for 7 years, and I would like to say I fell into it, but it was again another step of like pursuing something and that thing not happening, and then like all of a sudden I'm teaching.
What was it like your first year teaching at like the music business college in Nashville and knowing it took you till 26 to graduate?
It was terrifying. I remember looking in the mirror because I was looking at this as like, oh my gosh, I've never been a teacher before. I was a campus missionary for high schools and colleges in another life. And so I had experience teaching the Bible, but I never taught like academic material. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? And so I remember my first day, I like looked in the mirror and I was like, all right, it's going to be great. I'm going to be awesome. And then immediately the second thought is like, no, like I'm going to be the worst teacher of
Oh
all time. I was
no.
like, I can do this. No, I can't do this. And the guy who was responsible for hiring me, David Schreiber, who is like an indirect mentor, but he said something early on when I was so stressed about how do I teach? How do I do this? And he said, look, just stay one class ahead of your students. And that to me, like when I look
Wow.
at the whole big picture of teach for 3 months of great academic material, that was too crippling. I couldn't do that. But then if I said, all right, stay one class ahead of your students. Then when I went to prepare for that, if I prepared in a way where I was like, "Whoa, I'm actually 2 classes ahead," then that's great, but that was never the expectation. The expectation was like, just stay one step ahead. And then it made the preparation possible. It made it attainable. So yeah, it was scary, but I'll tell you what, that first year that I taught, I was in a unique season in life where I had the floodgates were wide open, where I had lots of availability, and I had classes. This is crazy, and I've not experienced this before, since then. Is my first class invested in me even harder than I could have ever invested in them.
What do you mean?
And, like, whereas it was like their pursuit of me, they were pursuing me just as hard as I was pursuing them as a teacher. They were so hungry and desiring, and they believed in me so deeply and were so connected to me that it was like this thing where I happen to have this extra availability where like, yeah, like a Friday night, like I would happen to be free. So yeah, I'll grab nachos with a student. and dive in, or like, uh, somebody was struggling with grief or something at 1 a.m. on a Thursday night, and I could be available. Um, and so the impact was so significant, and I had to learn since then that that wasn't necessarily the normal thing, nor was it attainable, sustainable, because I had to eventually set boundaries and things like that. But in that moment in time, it was perfect, uh, because I was doing this brand new thing, and I was dealing with these college freshmen who were so hungry, and it was like the perfect marriage of like me figuring it out and them like really wanting it. And then 7 years later, I've refined, I've gotten better. I'm a better teacher than I was then. I'm not a perfect teacher, but I care deeply, and that's allowed me to continue to do this.
You mentioned Jeff Gunkel, who is incredible. You said that he was your boss at a time, which I believe that was when you were at Universal Music Group, Capital
Yep.
Christian, which is where we met.
Yep.
You were manager of digital rights.
Right.
What is that?
So that was I that essentially meant, because Universal was dealing on both the publishing side, like in publishing meaning that you're licensing songs to be used by users, whether it's songs in radio, television, or film, or songs to be used in television and film. But also they're a proper record label in dealing with recording. So on managing the digital rights department, I essentially became a YouTube expert over the course of 3 years. I had no YouTube experience when Jeff started talking to me about this role. I knew what the average person knew about YouTube, and all of a sudden I was managing like all YouTube initiatives on the publishing side, and then running what's called a multi-channel network, which is an umbrella of artists channels, running an MCN, uh, for a YouTube MCN for Capital CMG. So I was dealing with songs, I was dealing with artists and marketing, and then trying to optimize content so that it would thrive in YouTube's algorithm.
What does all that mean? Like timing of posting or like
Yeah,
length of posts, or are there like back end tools that you had to like how
great
could
question.
somebody who has to do this themselves and an artist, or somebody who's, a green artist manager and is trying to get their artist seen on YouTube, like what does it mean that you were like optimizing YouTube and were the specialist?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to take a lot of like YouTube certification courses, and then had opportunities to learn from a lot of people. But so you're looking at the content and say, okay, like if I can follow like YouTube's best practices on, like for example, a thumbnail. A thumbnail is the image that people see on your video. 90% of the highest performing content on the entire YouTube platform worldwide, 90% of the highest performing content has a custom thumbnail. So, like a high res image that would often, that can include text if it makes sense, but an image that reflects what the content is going to be. This isn't clickbait, where you click thinking it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something else. But just like things like that, like through following these sort of best practices, and then reading a lot of YouTube is being a storyteller through analytics. You're reading analytics. YouTube's got this really robust analytics, which is just data. And you can find out through a lot of things. Like one, like when is the best time to release my content as an artist? When are my viewers mostly online? Um, and then you can see like, well, out of my content, what are people responding to most? What are they, liking, commenting on? Like, and maybe you find out like, and then through seeing what's performing well, then that can inform like what you do more of. And so it's a lot, it was a lot of that types of things. Um, we had the benefit of being a major record label that had partnerships with YouTube, but as an artist, there's so many resources out there if you're a green artist that you can there's so many videos from YouTube themselves about how to gain viewers, like how to read analytics. There's certification courses. All those things would be very, the average person receives 3,400 advertising messages a day. So like to cut through the noise on anything is incredibly difficult. So I would say as a brand new artist, if you're looking to get involved in YouTube as well as there's TikTok, there's even with short form content that's now coming in
Yeah, the shorts.
with TikTok and then YouTube having their own version of that with shorts, like you just said. Artists have so much that they have to think about. It's daunting. They have so many different platforms that they have to be present on and be active on. It can be really tough. And so my job at Capital was to work alongside of artists and to cast the widest net for their music and to see if we could find something that would hit. And occasionally we would, and those moments were really sweet.
So since 2021, you left and rejoined Sony Music, which was
Yes.
the company that helped you with your college rep program, um, and joined manager of YouTube operations and optimization, which is also through the Orchard. Let's talk
Right.
about like the Orchard, Sony, and what you do. How do they collide in the Venn diagram?
Yeah, so I joined with this label called AWOL, which was a label that stands for Artists Without a Label.
Oh my
But
gosh.
they are a label, I know. But they do have this really kind of exciting and artist-driven, artist-owned business model. So I started with AWOL, and then as soon as I joined AWOL, Sony purchased AWOL. And so eventually, when the smoke cleared, at the beginning of this year, I ended up transitioning into the Orchard. The Orchard is a best in class distributor of labels content, and so I still work on AWOL content, but they're just a part of, instead of being everything that I was doing before. Now they're just a part of many things that I work on. And the Orchard and AWOL are underneath Sony Music. So it's a definitely like a full circle moment to reunite and to be part of this system again that had such a deep impact on me. And it allows me to, primarily when I was with AWOL, I was working with content that was in the UK. I was working on stuff here in the US like Lauv and other things in the UK, like Little Sims that won the Mercury Prize for Best Album of the Year last year. Um, and I've gotten to do a lot of stuff that I am incredibly proud of. Lizzie McAlpine, which is kind of ushered in like the sad girl pop thing, along with Phoebe Bridgers and
That's my favorite kind of
Julie
music.
Baker,
Sad
right?
girl pop.
So it was just it just like, and now I get to work on all of that stuff, plus be like a point of contact in our Nashville office. Um, and so the amount of channels, that's how you and I have reunited working with Tribal, which Maverick City Music. I mean, one of the proudest moments of my career was launching, along with the Capital CMG team, launching the Tribal channel, which was the Springboard for
There
Maverick
it is
City Music.
too.
I'm just
Are
gonna
you
keep going
expecting
for it.
like a crumble
Yeah.
cookie box because you did
Yeah,
it
yeah,
twice?
yeah. But that was, Maverick City Music. Look, sometimes you hit lightning in a bottle, and I remember when that channel existed, it only had 125 views, 175 subscribers. And Tribal, which um is like the landing place for a lot of worship music, including Maverick City Music, was originally just supposed to be like an app. It wasn't supposed to be anything music oriented, really, really. And then this thing launched with Maverick City Music inside of Tribal, And then this worldwide phenomenon took place. There was a desperate need, myself included, to see diversity in the worship space that wasn't just called R&B or gospel. Uh, to see community. And so this innovative like worship movement that was communal, I was able to be a part of it and to be on the ground floor. I can't believe what Maverick City has become, selling out arena after arena, winning countless Grammys. I couldn't believe that when we pressed play on that first video, when we published it, I could have never guessed that it was going to lead to what it did. But I knew how deeply it impacted me. When I heard a line like "Take Me Back," sung by Dante
Oh,
Bowe, "Take me
great
back to
song.
when I first met you." Like it's I knew how deeply it impacted me, and I hope that there would be other people that would gravitate towards that, and they have. But I wish that I could say that was the standard for everything that I've that I've worked on. But yeah, so now I get to work on a lot of different projects, and it's all, and I'm grateful for it.
This role of manager of YouTube operations and optimization, is it essentially like the digital rights role? You're the all things YouTube, analytics, thumbnails, posting, audience, when to post. Is that essentially what it is?
Yeah, so when I was at Capital, I did get to do more of like the back end sort of work as far as like actual assets and like this is much more specialized where now I'm like channel managing. So I manage about 80 different YouTube channels.
Wow.
Like just before we got on this call, I was doing some work for a country artist named Kelsey Ballerini. So it's much more specialized now where channel managing is, yeah, it does involve uploading videos. It also involves like strategy. Whereas before I was dealing with like compositions and assets and all that stuff. Like the orchard is much more structured where they just want experts. Like I was more of a jack of all trades thing at Capital, which I love.
It's an incredible place to learn.
Right. Yeah, to be an expert in all areas of YouTube. And so now that's just like I get to do more marketing and focus on like being artist facing, locking arms with artists and their teams, their management teams, and it's fantastic.
I can't help but think, like, as we're having this conversation, thinking about how you described your childhood of broken home, lower middle class, just like afraid you weren't going to end up to be anything or be anyone or amount to anything. And then, you're dropping names of projects you've worked on, like Maverick City at the very beginning and Lauv and Kelsey Ballerini. And it's like, I can't help but wonder, like, do you believe you're living the dream at this point?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, yeah, yeah, I that's a really good question. Yeah, I do. I mean, I guess I just had to redefine what living the dream meant, and for me, um, there are people much younger than me that have achieved far greater professional success. They've got higher titles than me. Um, I have friends who I deeply love that are VPs and SVPs. And if you look at things as success, like living the dream as far as like title, uh, you know, then you could make an argument that I haven't arrived yet. But those things have never been an end game for me. My end game is to live out my faith in such a way that it impacts others and and to be able to do my job with excellence. And so I have two jobs that I love. I have two jobs year round. I have a full-time job working at an incredible record label, and then I get to walk alongside people, students, and to help them and to grow them and to be a champion for them. So in that sense, yeah, like 100%, I am living the dream, and but for a long time, I didn't feel like I was. And I will say there's a part we haven't mentioned in my job history is I worked for 9 years out of college. I led all college radio market development at BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated. So BMI, if you're unfamiliar with them as a performing rights organization, they pay songwriters and publishers when their music's used in radio, television, or film. They're the largest performing rights organization in the world.
You might hear it as like a PRO in
Right.
the industry. People will say the PROs.
Yep, PRO. And so they're really cool. And until just recently, they're now a for profit, but they were a not for profit for 75, 80 years. And this is whole like not about who you know, it's about who knows you. So I think this is an important story to tell for anybody who's feeling discouraged, looking for a job, and wanting one. I graduated college in January of 2009 when the music industry, it was a death sentence to work in the music industry. For those you don't know, the music industry was at an impasse because of people don't download music anymore. At least a lot of people, the majority of people don't. But at the time, when Napster and illegal downloading came out, it destroyed the industry. And to work at a record label or to have a job there or to aspire to work in the music industry was a very scary thing. Well, also, the economy had tanked in 2009. So I had this perfect resume where I interned in an A&R department at a label. I worked at Sony Music while I was in school, and I was a music director at my college radio station, and then made like dean's lists and had this great resume and experience. And I couldn't find a job. So much so that I had to move back home to Georgia. I had to get a job at a Dick's Sporting Goods.
Oh my gosh.
And my manager at Dick's Sporting Goods was somebody I'd known since childhood. We graduated high school together. So you imagine like the epitome of humility. Shout out to Chris Chandler, wherever you are. Grateful for you for giving me that chance. And to work at a sporting goods store. But I didn't give up. I kept grinding, and so this was in January. In April was National Record Store Day, and my biggest account was Grammys when I was with Sony. I was no longer with Sony because I graduated, but I still drove 4 hours to Nashville and volunteered for 13 hours for Record Store Day with Grammys.
Wow.
Just believing and hoping and trusting God that if I served with excellence, that it was ultimately going to be for my good. And next thing I know, I heard through a random family friend. It's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. So from a friend of a friend of a family friend of a husband of somebody found out about this job at BMI, college radio job, and says, "Hey, isn't there somebody that does college radio, like that's looking for a job?" I hear about that job. Then Mike Grimes, owner of Grimies, puts in a personal recommendation for me at BMI. And
my
that's how I
gosh.
landed that job overseeing every college radio station in the country.
Whoa. Wait. That's crazy.
Yes.
How
And
long did you do that?
I was there for 9 years.
Wow.
And one of the best, so I did all these things that I'm super proud of. I developed a platform called BMI Indie. I created this slogan that's still used today called "Helping Bands Avoid Desk Jobs Since 1939."
Wow.
I made T-shirts and custom handmade hoodies, and these were all outside of my role. My job was and this is why I think this is a really important lesson. I came into this job that was very operations based, no marketing. I just said I created BMI Indie. I just said I created these slogans and T-shirts and posters. None of those things were in my job description. In fact, it was entirely data oriented, not sexy at all. In fact, when I interviewed, um, my my boss says, "Hey, Brad, you're so passionate. I'm actually kind of concerned. This is a data job. This isn't music and marketing and all these
Oh,
things. Do you think
interesting.
that you'll be able to do this job?" And I said, "Yes, boss, no problem. Of course. I'm just excited to get a job and I'll do it. It'll be awesome." So I start this role and I immediately come out of the gate and do all these incredible things on even the data side. I break every company record as it relates to
Wow.
college radio. I shatter company record. I mean, by
Well, you knew it. You
I knew
had
it.
worked in it for so long.
Exactly. So I knew it. I was so hungry. I was so driven. And then because I broke all these company records, it gave me this idea to develop these marketing items, the helping bands avoid desk jobs since 1939, developing these marketing pieces. Because of my success, my boss saw my passion and he allowed me to do all these things that were way outside of my job description. So I'm doing all this marketing stuff. It's all going great. I've shattered these records. And then I get called into my boss's office. And he says, "Brad, this is incredible. You're doing so great. I can't believe all the stuff that you've done." But also like, "Hey, don't forget, like your main core responsibility is this data stuff. Like don't forget to like do that too." In my mind, I'm like, "Cool, let's just get this conversation over with. I'll go back to what I'm doing. Like I'm gonna just do the things that I really care about. That's like I'm crushing it. I'm breaking all these company records. I don't want to do all the data stuff. I don't want to do that stuff. I want to be talking with college radio stations. I want to be working with bands. I want to be doing marketing. I want to be doing all this stuff." So time keeps going on. I'm crushing it. Then I get called back into my boss's office. "Brad, I can't believe all the stuff you're doing. This is incredible. Dude, like, just still want to remind you, like, love what you're doing. I still just want to remind you about all the data stuff." And in my mind, like, okay, let's hurry up. Like, let's get this over with. I got to get back to this other stuff. Yeah, okay, yes, of course. I'll make sure I do all that data stuff. So I go back to doing all the stuff that I want to do. Things are going well. There's a
Were
new
you not doing the data stuff?
Oh, I'm doing it, but I'm barely doing it.
Okay.
And uh so then there was this SVP, this brand new SVP that comes in who wanted to be our next CEO. I took this chance. I asked him if he'll mentor me. He says yes. I couldn't believe it. He said yes. So I'm meeting with him. All this stuff is going great. But then like 2 weeks later, I'm in a meeting with my boss again about the data stuff. Then uh eventually I get called to his office and he says, "Here, Brad, I need you to sign this." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like what is this?" And he says, "This is a document that says that you're under probation and that if this doesn't get resolved, you're going to lose your job." And I was completely blindsided. All of those things that I'd done, all the company records that I'd broken, all of the marketing pieces that I made that are still being used to this day, all of those things that I'd done, I was doing them so that I could get ahead in my career, but they weren't getting me ahead. They were the only things that were preventing me from getting fired. And
Mm.
I was devastated. And I went back to that SVP that was mentoring me, and I was like, I felt like the biggest possible scrub. And I assumed that somebody who was that successful, this guy who used to be Bill Gates' right-hand man at Microsoft,
Wow.
that he would no longer want to work with me. And I said, told him what happened. He goes, "No, like let's continue to meet, but you need to go and fix this. Don't let old business affect new business." And I learned a valuable lesson through that, and I'm so grateful for my boss, who's to me still to this day. He actually he just retired from BMI after 34 years.
Wow.
He's been the biggest advocate of me, was the hugest advocate of me when I started teaching, all that stuff. But I learned through that situation that life is defined by moments where you did not what you wanted to do, but what you needed to do. And my job was not to do these great marketing pieces and catchy slogans. My job was to do what my boss asked me to do, was to fulfill a function. And what was valuable to him was that data stuff. And while I was going to be in that job, I had to do it. So moving forward from that time until I left, all the stuff I loved doing, I stopped doing. And then I just focused on this data stuff, because at the end of the day, I had a daughter to provide for. And you're not always going to love, like, Gen Z. That's one of the biggest things that I see across Gen Z is they want to make an impact, but true impact is hardly, if ever, immediate. And they also don't often are receptive to critique. They're not often, if they're not all in on something, if it's not what they want to do, if they don't like what it is, they're gone. And so I was guilty of that just as much. And I had to learn through that experience. So I wouldn't be where I am today at the orchard or things like that without that valuable lesson of how to prioritize my work, how to carry myself, and to know what was significant. So shout out to that boss at BMI. I'm so grateful for him. I can't believe he's retiring today.
You brought up a great point too of something that you've noticed of Gen Z, or people entering the workforce, of if it's not what I want to do, I'm just not going to do it. Or I don't want to apply for that job. It's not really what I want to be doing. It's like, you're not applying for your job for the rest of your life. You're applying for a row on your resume and for people to meet, and to your point, for them to meet you, for you to
Yeah.
come to mind in the future. I will say, like, sitting a few years down in my career now, that has, on this side, I'll just share with everybody listening, like, that is a fear of a people manager, of a boss. That is a fear of a manager, of, if I hire a Gen Z and I need to give them critical feedback, are they just like, is that trust all of a sudden broken and they're just going to leave in 6 months because
Right.
of this confrontational conversation I had that they didn't really want to hear? But if I don't have it, I'm doing them a disservice. And so it creates this, like, fear, I think, between the two generations in the workforce these days. I think that's something to unpack, or see the tides change, or
It's really tough, because, and I'm seeing this with my students more so than, like, over the last 2 years, I'm seeing this more and more. So each generation wants to do better than the generation previously. Like my dad's generation, like my grandfather, like, never told his dad that he loved him, or told his kids that he loved them. Like, wasn't, like, physically affectionate. Like the World War II generation, like, they didn't show, like, affection in that way. So my dad's generation says we want to do something different. They say, okay, like, we want to be more involved in our kids' life, and that's great. And then the generation after that, and then finally, kind of my generation, as a parent. So it was with this, like, I don't know if this theory is correct, but it's what I've seen, is that it seems like this like, out of great intentions, this way overcorrection has occurred, where now, like, the kids that are in college, they're taught, they're so coddled, and they've been given this idea that everybody gets a blue ribbon. And so it's this idea that hard work and determination are severe forms of abuse, that everybody is entitled to every level of success. And that's just not true. That's not how the world works. And because that's not how the world works, when they face any kind of adversity right now, it's crippling to them. Whether it's somebody critiquing, whether it's them hearing the word no, whether it's, like, through those mistakes, and I don't know what the solution is. It like, hurts my heart for these kids, because I don't know. One, I don't necessarily know, how how it fully started. I also don't know how to change it, but I'm doing everything I can, because it's a tough thing, because people are so fragile. These students are so fragile that any sort of adversity destroys them. But I'll tell you what, for me, like I'll never forget that BMI Indie program I built at BMI. It was part branding, part education, part artist promotion. I had worked with that SVP to develop it, and I pitched it all the way across the company, including to our CEO, and it gotten a lot of steam. Well, there was this one guy who helped me develop the idea, or he was just a really good friend that also worked at the company. I stayed up all night working on this idea. I thought I had mastered literally all night working on it. I'd sent him this whole blueprint for this, like a new initiative at the company. And he said, Brad, I believe in this idea. I think this is, I believe in you, but this is what you've communicated here isn't it. This is not it. And I remember reading that, and I just I broke down in tears because I was like, this thing that I'd been working on for months. I was just told that I had completely missed the mark. And I was devastated, but I knew that he cared about me. I knew that he was for me. I knew that he was, and also I knew he was incredibly smart. I knew he was an expert in these things. So I immediately threw the tears and like thanked him. And then I went back to the drawing board. Instead of trying to create something that I thought would be successful to an SVP or would change the whole landscape of our company, instead of trying to do that, I just started typing whatever was in my heart. And then I sent it back to him and he goes, that's it. That's it. You've nailed it.
What was the difference?
The difference is instead of trying to come up with a business plan that was going to be successful, I just got to the heart of what it was. Like I didn't need to overcomplicate it with business jargon. I just had to express what the need was. And then from there, then you could build on top of it. But I'd made it too complicated. It's saying that there was a need for education, branding, and artist promotion. And I don't remember exactly how I communicated like that summary then, but I stripped everything away and just laid out the idea of the core of what it was. But it would have been impossible for me to do that without the humility of finding out that I had missed. And so that is what I want to offer to students today, to anybody growing up in this industry. Like, I have failed. I've lost jobs in this industry. I've grown, and it's every failure has been just as important to me as every success. And so I just hope that the people that are coming up today, that they can find some sort of way to be able to handle and to work through adversity, because there's a huge amount of sweetness that comes out of the other side. Like perseverance, I used to think of perseverance as overcoming things, but now I know that perseverance is moving forward in the face of things. There are things that are going on in my life that are difficult. There are things, mistakes that I've made before that, man, I regret. But to be able to move forward and to continue to grow in that and not be defined by those things and to learn from them is a very rare thing. And I'm, I've been fortunate to learn from a few of those.
Thanks for listening to the Springboard Music Podcast. If there's something that resonated with you in this episode, or an episode that you would like for us to create in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Springboard Music on Instagram.